Hello and welcome to this video on the Rest Hole Wrestling channel with myself, Kieran, and of course Gareth. There he is over there.
Hello, mate.
He is here. And we're going to be talking about something that we've all been talking about. We've all talked about in Twitter land once in our lives if you're viewing this video, and that is the AEW Women's Division. We've talked about this before. There is a video on
Yeah,
this. Go on.
we quite a lengthy discussion on it about 4 or 5 months ago, was it? It was before Full Gear for sure. I think it was
Yep.
just after All Out,
Mhm.
wasn't it? And there were some things, and it was like, oh, I don't know if this is getting better. I don't know if this is getting worse. We had a little talk about it, but there's been a lot of developments since then. I think there's a lot of new things to talk about. Obviously, it's not perfect, but I have been seeing a lot of people saying recently, increasing the numbers increase at most weeks, let's say, if something good happens and stuff. But recently we've seen just even yesterday the dark matches were announced, and there were loads of women's matches and loads of exciting ones as well, and just everyone was like, look, it's getting better. And so we've had our criticisms in the past, and we've also defended them in the past as well. So it's an interesting position where they're at the moment. A lot of people are very optimistic, and I think that's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I think this is something that's going to be a bit of a theme of this episode is that in terms of potential, I think there's loads going forward. But I
Mm,
think what the conversation needs to be had is for the now, for the
yeah,
present, how things go forward. And you can think of this as a bit of an update video. So let's update on our thoughts, essentially. So let's talk
yeah,
about how things have improved. Let's talk about how things have gradually changed since we've last talked about this. I'll let you start, my man.
yeah. I think like the underlining point would definitely be that it has improved. There's certain things which is like which I'm going to say for like later in the video because it's when we're going to get to other topics, and like more criticisms will come in there. Or it's not even necessarily a criticism. It's just things where it's like, okay, you've done this good, but this still needs work. And it's the same with anything. Like nothing or very little in the world is ever going to be perfect, except for me. And
No.
and yeah, it's always going to be in need of improvement, basically, especially in wrestling, because nothing in wrestling is ever perfect, um, except for me. And yeah, I think this is something, particularly the women's division, where it was never going to be perfect or even brilliant from the outset. It was never going to be the best women's division ever or in America immediately. But I think over the last few months since we last spoke about it, they have taken a few steps to start pushing it in that direction. It's been nice to see like longer matches on Dynamite. Because before we were getting sometimes we get a decent one, but it was like they were very few and far between. It's usually oftentimes just a squash match, and just 5 minutes max. Sometimes not even that. Sometimes it literally be like a 2 minute match. But more recently, in the last few months, we've been getting, including like a picture in picture ad break, of course, like up to 10 minutes at times. And this isn't. You say I kind of said that as if it's like, oh, that's really good. I feel like there still needs to be an idea to push it longer than that. If the match needs it, you don't want to just be throwing random talent out for 20 minutes because that's not any good. But finding ways of giving them a bit more time and stuff, because ultimately I think airtime. One problem I always or had before was like they weren't really getting the opportunities to get over, and so that was often the criticism, is that they weren't bringing in the ratings and stuff, and they weren't being given the opportunities. Now they're being given more of the opportunities, and you see as well the ratings in terms of the women's segments and stuff aren't going down as much as they used to. Sometimes it depends on the week. Obviously, it depends what you're putting on, but generally, what they're doing isn't harming the product. And so it's like, okay, well, if it's not, then give them a little bit more. So again, with all of this, all of the credit we'll give them in this video, it still needs to be taken with a thing of like, okay, and now use that to do a bit more. But ultimately, it's a work in progress, as we all know. But longer matches, we're getting more segments as well, which is really good. Whether that be just and the thing is, sometimes these aren't good segments, which is another criticism to have. But the fact that they're doing them is a step in the right direction, because that's what I was saying before: is you've got to let them sink or swim. You can't just be too scared to let them do anything. And some of them are doing really well. I think like Ty Conti, for example, has really shown over recent weeks and months, especially, that she's someone who fans are actually invested in and want to see in, whether it's her matches, or with her storyline with Anna Jay as well. Um, so it's just good to see those things. They've taken little steps to improving things, but there's always more you can do. And as well on Dark, you really see the development of the roster generally, which has been deepened and established since we last spoke as well. Um, there are some talents on Dark, which we'll get into, but also just names like Serena Deeb, Thunder Rosa, Conti, Anna Jay as well. I think they were all there when we last spoke, but they've all been established and developed properly on the roster now, rather than just being potential or whatever. So yeah, there are some really nice things that have happened, I think, and some good steps have been taken to improving things.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of tough to jump onto this, but I would personally argue some things have improved, whereas others really
Mm.
have taken a humongous dip. I think
Yeah,
there's no doubt about it that the the potential. I don't think we ever really argued that the potential of the people who are fairly green, the people who are fairly early in their development, those people look really exciting, and we're excited to see how they are in the future. However,
yeah,
for the people that they are in the now, the utilization of the people that can really make an impact hasn't been as particularly strong as we would have liked, at least in my opinion, like I would have liked.
yeah.
So, I mean, in regards to obviously like Sheeta, even when we were
Mm.
talking about in September, we weren't far off when she was on a weekly basis, put on stellar matches, and it was just stellar match, and it wasn't a whole lot going forward after that, but we were at least
Yeah,
getting that. We were at least, and now we're at a point where we don't even see her on a weekly basis, and
yeah,
we see Cody on a weekly basis, but we don't see our women's champion on a weekly basis. Do you know?
yeah,
Do you get my vibe? So it's those little things, those little incentives, and also their creativity as well in regards to segments with their women's division hasn't been really all that inspired, especially with how the characters you would think of them interacting. So
yeah.
the best sort of analogy I can give as well is you being creative of something often shows an element of you caring,
Mm.
and if they don't care about the women's division, then how on earth can you expect us lot who are viewing this to care? You know,
Yeah.
they like, and especially like things where they're placing them on the third quarter of
Mm.
the show, and I'm not gonna beat it to a pulp. There's definitely been some great stuff, but like these things are still becoming a running theme, and it's something that definitely needs to be pummeled to the ground and getting rid of. And I like, for example, we had Tay Conti and Serena Deeb in an NWA Champions match. We were all intrigued by that match. They did a
Yeah.
phenomenal job building up to it. A little package on YouTube, absolutely fantastic
Mm.
stuff, building to the past of Tay Conti and the styles of both wrestlers heading into this match, and you saw that play out to a little extent. Would have loved to have seen a bit more of it. That
Mm.
would have come out with a bit more time, going on to your point. But,
Yeah.
like, at the end of the day, it was still on the third quarter, as we've always seen them before, like a main event, before a thing that people will probably care about. And I mean, you could have just thrown it at a point where it could have been the beginning. It could have been the hottest thing. You couldn't have given it a couple of minutes. This is Serena Deeb. This is a coach. This is someone who's been there, done that, done countless stuff. She's been fantastic when she's turned up. Take on D has shown terrific um, performances when we have seen her, and has really grown in the eyes of many wrestling fans around the world. You couldn't have just given it a bit more time.
Mm.
It's utilization. It's caring about things, and like I can bring this up in regards to someone like Sting, for example, like in terms of
Yeah.
the creative ways as well. Because I mean, when I've when we've seen Sting, he's done the same thing on and on and on and again, and eventually over time, what we've grown to care less about that because this is
Yeah.
so boring, it's so dry, it's so um void of any sort of substance, and
Yeah.
that's just Sting. This is an entire division, you know. So like
Yeah.
it's a real shame, but there have been some good stuff. I think the waiting room for Britt Baker has been a good addition for
Yeah.
her, especially for growing other things. I was thinking about like maybe like you could criticize the whole Code and Jade Cargill, especially them getting on a waiting room with Britt Baker when she could be doing things with Thunder Rosa. You could argue that, and I'd hear that one out because I do think you should be doing more with Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker because they're two of the more well, it's certainly two of my favourites within the division,
Yeah.
certainly. But at the end of the day, it works for Britt Baker's character, which is something that we're going to be talking about, I assume, going forward on this
Yeah.
little show here. Character being a big issue here. Um, and that's one thing that they have excelled with. And that's something that Britt Baker has often done since
Yeah.
her heel turn early in the year. She's excelled at
Yeah.
most things. Be that when she's turned up with a character and she's been phenomenal with Tony Schiavone, be that when she's injured and then she's doing the role model thing and she's doing comedic segments or she's doing really goofy segments with Big Swole, she's consistently been there. And she's been phenomenal as well.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of that has been her own doing and not on the doing of the people at the back, whoever is booking this
Yeah.
stuff. Which,
The
by the
credit
way,
you can give them,
go
the
on.
credit you can give them for that is just based on at least they're giving her the opportunity to go and do it. You kind of just wish off the back of that, why not give some of the other women? Because a lot of people didn't see anything in Britt Baker before she turned heel and stuff. Everyone was like, okay, what's all the hype about?
Mm.
And then they gave her the chance to go and show something different, and do something, and it worked. And I would like to see them take more risks and stuff with stuff like that. Sometimes it's going to flop, calculated, intelligent risks. Obviously, this is one that they did plan out, and they were like, okay, this is how you're going to do it, but it paid off. And if you're smart about it, I think things like that you'll be better for it, and your division will be better for it, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's important to take risks on the people that at least show a little an element of promise and excitement and all those variety of things. I think just taking risks for the sake of taking, not that you're saying that, but I think
Yeah, yeah,
taking
yeah,
risks for the sake of taking risks is not a particularly great thing. But either way,
yeah,
I've pummeled it to the ground in a bit, but and that's just my honest opinion. It's like how have things improved? Well, your world champion is in a worse state now than she was when we last talked.
yeah. I
Um,
think I think with the belt and stuff, I'm just looking forward to a new champion. And like the thing with Shida was so good for a good while, like you said, she was showing up regularly and stuff, and having matches here there, um, and it was always good stuff. And then kind of post All Out, kind of since we had that conversation, really, it's just kind of been like more and more and more. Even there was even like before All Out, it was like the month leading up. I remember we were just like, who's gonna face her at All Out, and then like the talk was like, oh, maybe people were saying Thunder Rosa or Kairi Sane because Kairi was available at that point, and it's like as great as that match was and stuff. It wasn't. They kind of knew that they had that, and She'd just sat there doing nothing for like a good month, and then afterwards as well, they seem to have got quite comfortable in that position. I think it's probably because they don't really know what Sheeda's character is, or they don't know how to put her across, which is again something we'll come on to. But yeah, I think that championship really needs a good, strong champion, and um, someone like Britt Baker, I think, clearly shows she's had the trust from the higher ups and stuff. So I think she seems like the best choice. But the sooner we get there, the better, I think, and I think the division will be better for it. Just looking forward to that now.
yeah, but talking of something to look forward to, let's talk about potential signings that they could possibly make to push the division forward and perhaps inspire some inspiration, I guess, like
Yeah,
creativity and all the things I've just been talking about. And I, in that, we could talk about their current roster and what they have, and maybe talk about what they don't have, and
yeah,
bring that forward in terms of potential signings. And I think something that's the person I want to bring up, And I've got a bit of a quote here which I found really interesting from Chris Statlander. She was talking to Fightful at one point.
Mm.
And this is a quote that she says, and it's what she says is it's valid to accept criticism. This is obviously on the women's division, but
Mm.
people have to remember that almost every single girl that got signed has never worked on TV before. A lot of the
Yeah.
men on the roster have worked on TV, and if they haven't, they're working with people who have been on TV.
Mm.
This is a quote from Statlander, and I think taking inspiration from that, there's a variety of reasons why I want to sign this particular person, but I think this is a great example as to why they need to sign Tia Trinidad, Zelina,
Mm.
wherever I forgot her name now, Zelina Vega,
Zelina Vega on WWE.
um,
Yeah.
and for that exact reason, from someone within the company themselves that sees the ins and outs and can possibly see, where the flaws are in regards to people not working TV, and because let's not forget as well,
Yeah.
they've not many of them have worked TV before. This is a very very recent quote, by the way. This is in the last like couple of months,
Yeah.
and not only that, they're not getting much opportunity in the first place. So first of all, to address that, more
Yeah.
opportunity, but it
Yeah,
just
they are getting more on dark, which is obviously they use the same cameras and stuff as on TV, so that is good to learn those skills. But yeah,
yeah.
it is a different step up going to TV. Like part of the reason Diana Perazzo didn't join AEW was because it was like a big spotlight and a bigger company. She just wanted to develop, work on her craft, and like hone it somewhere where it was a bit like safe. I think she's doing a degree as well at the same time, so I think that was part of it, and it was just like jumping to AW was just like something too big, and so that is very much a thing. And another thing is like on the indies, even a woman who's been on the indies for 10 years, they don't get anywhere near the amount of time or opportunities on the indies either. So even
Mm,
just working in ring for more than 10 minutes isn't something that a lot of these would have done. Obviously, people like Shida and stuff have had great matches in Japan. Thunder Rosa's had some really great matches and stuff. They've got some of the talent there, but a lot of them haven't. So that is an area where, like, I think just people have worked on TV, people have worked with the top talent. So basically, come from WWE or maybe Impact or whatever would be really really good. I think as well. Speaking of Impact, I think we will see a couple of the women from there arriving at some point, which I think would be good. My worry is just like, are they going to stick around? Are they just going to fill a gap? In which case, I'd rather, from an AEW point of view, if they were just going to fill a gap, I'd rather they sign someone who they could actually develop into their own talent.
mm-hmm.
I don't mind, a couple of things here and there, but I'd rather like if an AEW woman goes to Impact and gets some experience there, that's all good because again, it's experience again shooting with cameras and stuff. But yeah, I just don't want this an influx of like really great talent, and then AW are like, okay, let's do this, and then that harms or the growth of the people they've got already.
Mm-hmm.
I think like there is some really promising talent that we see on Dark quite regularly. People like Kylan King, Red Velvet, Layla Hirsch, Alex Gracia. Obviously, names like these, you could look at Tay Conti and Anna Jay 6 months ago, and they were kind of in that same bracket, and they've already risen up. Elena Black has obviously now gone to WWE. Was one of those who I was really looking forward to, kind of being one of those that came from Dark and like did something. So I'm hoping they manage to keep hold of these four that I've mentioned now, especially Red Velvet, Layla Hirsch, who look really good, um, and really promising. Um, so I think that's definitely something when you look at their current roster. It's like just want them to keep hold of those. Red Velvet's changed her Twitter handle recently, which suggests she's signed some sort of actual deal. She hasn't been given the all elite thing, but she's not a huge talent, so it might just be more of like a development thing. So that's good to see. Layla Hirsch has had quite a few spots on Dynamite, so I assume she's been signed to one of those contracts as well. So that is really promising to see. But yeah, I think ultimately, like you say, people with experience are really good, and it worries me. I forget her name now. Alison Kay. It worries me because she was on Full Gear buy-in, and I thought, oh, that's good because this is, it's a big spot for the women's division. Yes, it's the buy-in and stuff, but it's the buy-in of a pay-per-view. They're trusting her to get people to click and buy the pay-per-view, which is an important spot. better than what women get on Dynamite, for example. She had a good match with Serena Deeb, which most people do because she's really good. But she's someone with a fair amount of experience. She's shot with TV before and stuff as well, and she wouldn't be like a huge star in the division. I think Thea Trinidad obviously would be, but she'd be someone who could work with these developing talents on Dark or in a match on Dynamite and be really good, and then also be a legit title challenger as well. Probably not going to be the star of the division or the champion or anything anytime soon, but I think it would be really important because it's not just about getting who's like a flashy name or who looks like they have amazing potential. It's getting people like Serena Deeb before she was signed. Everyone was like, okay, the woman who was in CM Punk's thing 10 years ago and has been a coach. Okay, this will be interesting. Looks like she's been brought in to help the younger talent and stuff. And then she comes in, she's one of the best things in the division. So I think another one of those, a big star, and maybe locking down a couple of those dark talents if they haven't already. That would be a really nice step to take, and I think that would give me a lot of confidence moving forward. Because like we were talking about earlier, Shida kind of ran out of opponents. She kind of faced everyone, and that's kind of what you're going to do. And ultimately, the belt probably should have been taken off her before. I think Baker probably should be champion by now. Really, I think they could have, instead of dragging things out for so long and having Shida do nothing, you could have had her do things more regularly, get through it quicker. But I don't know. It feels like they just wanted to give her a lengthy title reign rather than a good one, which is kind of frustrating because it started off really really well. But it is what it is. Ultimately, I'm just looking forward to Britt Baker getting that, but I'm hoping they don't just run through all the matches that they could possibly do in a few months and then be like, fuck, now we've got no original match. And that's the problem where like a thin roster like what they've got comes in. So hopefully they pace it a little bit better than they did with Shida.
Yeah. Um. Well, let's just. It's a bit of a ceiling, really. The whole
Mm,
match thing, in just having matches and those matches being great and leaving it at that. And we'll get into it soon regarding character, but I just want to talk about something as well. And that is in reference to the tournament, which we'll talk about, but more so because we're on the topic of potential signings. I want to talk about Japanese talent.
yeah.
Um, and I think I just want to get my thoughts out there in regards to the Japanese talent side of things, and that I think if they were to sign Yoshi wrestlers and all these variety of people, I think it would allow the division to become more diverse in like multiple facets, whatever you want to call it. However, given
Mm,
the recent, I say recent track record as a whole,
yeah.
I don't believe that they could really. I think they struggle to combat telling really effective stories with those talents. I
Yeah.
mean, they can't even do it with people like Swole who can easily do some great stuff on the mic and tell effective
Yeah.
stories. Like Britt Baker, they got Thunder Rose on the book. Yes, she's not signed with them, but they've basically got her in for the time being.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got, even when you've got exceptional people who can really do that side of things, you can't
Mm,
allow them to do it well. You can't find anything for them to enable them. You can't. Yeah, it's just so like it needs to be proven for me personally. It needs to be proven.
yeah.
They need to have had their experience on TV, which I think the Impact thing. The more I think about it now, because at the beginning I wasn't too sure, wasn't too keen on the
Yeah.
idea, but I think now when I think about it more in regards to the fact that the talent that are there in Impact, they have been there for a little while now, you know,
Yeah.
and I think they with that side of experience, I think I'm in very much in the same camp as you in regards to loans. I think you want to think of loans like, I know I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but it is related. You want to think of it like a bit of a football team, right? You want loans to
Yeah.
enhance your squad, not be the backbone of your squad, you know?
Yeah.
And it's no different to this division. You want it to come in and go, to keep things fresh, to keep that talent pool moving, to keep it fluid and stuff. So people
Mm,
can come in and mix things up a little bit, but that's not your backbone is still there. You've got the guys like Serena Deep, you've got to take Conti, you've got Britt Baker, you've got hopefully Thunder Rosa, you've got all these guys, and then
Mm.
hopefully you might get your Jordan Grace or something in for a bit. That's where it's meant to be. You know.
Yeah,
Um. So yeah, it's um. So it's just. Oh, yeah. I want Tia Trinidad in this big time.
yeah.
Um.
I think she would like. You look at like the potential matchups she can have with like you just think about her mic skills and stuff, and you just think like that if you've got like a few good proven talkers and stuff in the division with like particularly Britt Baker and Tia Trinidad, I think you're going to have a really exciting potential title feud down the line, which you can build for a pay per view. And she's got the name, she's got the talent, she's got everything you'll need for that. And that just like you can just think of something like that as being like the direction in which to push,
Mm.
and that would give me a lot of hope. It really would, and we could see that within the next couple of weeks. So I mean, let's hope for it.
Yeah.
Again, with that women's tournament, I think they're going to need um, at least I don't know. I don't know how they. The thing is, we don't know how they're going to structure it. If like half of it's in Japan with Japanese talent, and then they're just going to fly back over Riho and Yuka Sakazaki or whatever, then fuck knows. But if it's just the thing of like, okay, we're getting the Japanese talent back, and it's all gonna, the rest of it's gonna be in the US, then 16 spots. You don't just want this full of like people from Dark and stuff like that. You want it full of like good matches and stuff. So yeah, and someone like that would be a really good thing. And I think we'll get to that, but we'll get onto the tournament.
Yeah,
But
we'll
yeah,
get onto it, but like
it's
we talk about
potentially very
signings here.
exciting with someone
Yeah.
like Trinidad coming in. I think.
Yeah, we'll talk about signings here, and I think in the tournament we might feed. I'm assuming here, but I think we might get a surprise or two along the way, um,
Yeah.
which I think is related. So we talked about that, and we have touched upon this topic, but let's dive straight into it. Really, current quality of the division. Let's,
Yeah, I think we basically already kind of nailed it with like the a lot of the stuff we're seeing is good, but then some of it not so much. But the fact is, we're getting longer matches, more segments. We've seen the waiting room, as you said earlier, and so those are some like improvements they've made to the quality of the division actually seen on Dynamite. So Dark is something people often talk about. There's loads of great work going on in Dark. It's like that's great for a couple of years down the line, but realistically, it may be because Conti's really like kind of sprung out and been like, and Anna Jay to an extent as well. I think Anna Jay's not quite had the same level of match quality, but like in terms of like the hype she's been able to generate and stuff, very similar. And obviously for the place she's at, it's way beyond what you would expect. So, sometimes these things can go a lot quicker than maybe you'd expect them to. So maybe not necessarily 2 years, but it's not for the here and now. And it's just annoying when you do want them to be doing good stuff. And I think when you see stuff like the Abaddon Cheetah thing, there was no need to have. I mean, you can do the match and stuff. They had a good match on Dark before the pandemic started, so you can do the match and stuff. That's fine. But the story they told around it, and bear in mind that was one of the few stories Sheeta's had as champion, if not the only proper like actual. I mean, it's still even hard to call it a proper story, really. But um, it was just so bad, and it's just like just give them good stuff to do. Don't do things where it's just like going against their character. And I'm kind of already leaning into the next point now. So I reckon we'll just move on to that because I think that's really where the main criticism comes down is they're giving them those extra minutes in the matches and stuff, a couple more segments here and there. There's more feuds and stuff than there were. I think, when you look at Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa, Jay Cargill, Brandy, Red Velvet, I don't really know who's involved in that anymore because of obviously Brandy getting pregnant. I think it's going to be Cargill and Red Velvet. But that's another one. We had Abaddon Shida. Conti and Serena D was only a small one, but it was something there and something where they told an actual. They gave you a setup and they paid it off basically. So very short story, but good nonetheless in that sense. And then also something. The only thing where I'm looking at it as like it seems like they're doing a long term thread here with some kind of something is take on Tia and Anna Jay and their friendship, because they've had hints before, and I think they pulled it back. So I think they wanted to go longer term with it, which is a positive thing to see, because maybe in a year's time, 2 years' time, we're looking at this as maybe the best story AEW have told in their women's division. So if if it ends up being that, then brilliant. But for the here and now, though, it's like it's all very well and good, like you said, having these longer matches and stuff. But if there's nothing to invest us in, you're gonna get bored of those matches quite quickly. And especially without having the largest roster, it's not like you got like with the men. You know, they can throw out Sammy Guevara one week, and then it's Ricky Starks the next, and then it's Darby Allin. It's like they've just got so much talent, so much great talent you can throw out there, and just I can kind of forget that this doesn't really have a huge amount of story to it because it's just exciting. But the women's division eventually going to run out of exciting, fresh matchups, which they again they haven't done yet, but they're starting to get there, and it's a worrying sign. They need to like switch things up, which is why Baker being champion is going to be such a good thing. But yeah, it's just they need to push those stories in a way where it's more than just oh, I want to have a match with you. Let's have a match or let's have a fight. Like even the Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa thing basically comes down to a couple of interferences here and there. It's not really a story. Like I feel like there's a difference between like feuding and like having an actual story. And feuding and competitive storytelling, let's call it, is fine, but it can't be all you do. And for the most part, Ty Conti and Anna Jay aside, it's all they're really doing. I guess Abaddon and Sheeda as well, but again, that wasn't very good. So that's something I'd really like to see improved for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm in complete agreement. I think consistently comes into this as well. There was a time at Full Gear where Nyla Rose and Guerrero were teasing a split, and then that was completely forgotten.
They did that like a couple months earlier as well, something kind of similar. And I was just like, at that point, it was like, oh, these two have only just got together. Why is this happening? And then we got to Full Gear and they kind of teased it again. It's like, but again, Nyla's barely ever on TV. We don't see her ever try to do anything. And she was number one contender for like 3 months, 2, 3 months. She never once came out and was like, had a squash match and was like, oh, Ishida, where are you at? I want the fight and stuff. There's stuff on social media, and I think there might have been something ish on Dark at one point. I think it was when they were actually building up to it. So it's still like it was very much convenient for them at that point to do that. But and then eventually it was just like, oh yeah, she's number one contender on Dynamite, and you're just like, yeah, she's been number one contender for ages. So that's something. And again, it's because they didn't want to do the match until then. But it's very easy to just come up, with a certain reason for why this match can't happen for whatever it is. And then when you get there, it's like you've actually built it, you've actually wanted to see it for a while then.
Yeah,
So yeah, the Nyla Rose character is one much like kind of Lance Archer in the men's division. They don't seem to really know how to book a monster or anything like that, because when they're not doing anything, they just sit there and do nothing. And it's like, I don't believe that Nyla Rose and Lance Archer's characters will be doing this. I believe they would be trying to make a statement. And so it's, it's one of the problems with the rankings, because if you become the number one contender, if you win so many matches and stuff, or if you're just destroying people, then you're just going to have to keep having title matches and stuff. It's one of the problems with the rankings. But like ultimately, it just frustrates me that Nyla Rose basically does nothing. And when she does, it's kind of just like, oh yeah, I'm here. Yeah. And it's just like, why haven't you done things? I remember there was a time when she was trying to get to Riho, which is power bombing people through the table and stuff. It's like when they've got something in mind for the end goal, it's like, okay, we know how to get there sometimes, you know. With Nyla at least, when they've got an idea of where it's going, they'll have something. But then when they don't, they just kind of leave her, and it's really frustrating.
yeah. But like, also when you talk about the rankings, I want to say that Big Swole was in the top five most weeks, and like,
Yeah,
bear in mind that we very rarely saw her for one point, and when we did, like, it was difficult to get behind in their matches because they were of a rough quality,
yeah,
and I think that just speaks for in itself, really. If your top competitors, at least the ones you're positioning within these rankings, they're just you're struggling to get behind them as characters, and
mm,
a variety of things, whether that's too early on or wherever it may be. I don't know. Maybe just taking risks and they don't pay off. Like I said, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show, really, like the ranking system is a bit of a weird one. I think that's in a video in itself.
Yeah. Sure.
But again, quote women's division. We've said it before, said it again to make the point clear. Britt Baker, man. Um, I
Yeah.
think there's a lot. There is a lot to say about having a really effective, great heel in your division to be a strong backbone of your division. I think there's a lot of good examples, which is why I think John Moxley was such a breakthrough for at least me personally, because he was a face and he managed to do some good out of it all. That's quite
Yeah.
rare. History will tell you, like, a lot of the time, that heels in top positions and baby faces climbing those mountains, reaching for the stars, all that cheesy stuff, right? That
Yeah.
works. And I think fighting champions are all well and good until there's no one to fight anymore. Like you're
Yeah.
saying,
Or until they're not booked to fight, if there is
exactly.
someone.
And
Yeah.
even then, it's not them making the active divisions decisions to fight. It's someone else going up to him and says, "Fight me," and she's like, "All right."
Yeah, I mean, this is what part of the problem, and it's something not just exclusive to Shida, but like the characterization of a lot of the women in the division. Like I was saying with Nyla Rose, like when they've got an idea, they'll do something. When not, she just kind of sits there and does nothing. And as a monster, you think, well, go and do something because that's kind of what you do. Um, and when she actually wants something, that is what she's shown that she will do. Same with Lance Archer. Again, it's I don't think that's just a women's thing. I think that's just a thing of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
monsters are hard to book because it's like you can't really have them take a loss too easily. Um, but like in terms of Sheeta and stuff, like the idea was always like, oh, fighting champion and stuff. But then Abaddon comes along, she's like scared. And she's like, oh no, I'm not sure I want to fight you. Well, you're not fighting champion then. She barely ever fights, and when she does, it's usually like Nyla Rose stepping to Sheeta. It was often other people coming up to her. Thunder Rosa turned up. I think like Sheeta said something like, "I want to fight the best," and like even though there was a number one contender there for her to fight, it was like, "I want to fight the best," and it's like, "Well, go and fight the number one contender," and then Thunder Rosa turns up and is like, "Yeah, I'll come and fight you," and again, it was like someone else taking the action, and particularly as like a baby face, it's hard to get behind Sheeta because of that. Um, Especially because again, through the language barrier and stuff like that, she doesn't get to show much character, and so all we really have is wrestling in her matches and stuff. And we want to go in again. All it is as long as she's calling the shots of like she's taking on the challenger rather than the challenger coming to her and her being like, okay, I guess, like some taking months to fight number one contenders and stuff like that. Um, it's a problem, and like the thing is, all it takes is like just a little bit of story, and you can work all these things in. Um, but again, it's not just Sheeta, it's not just Nyla. Um, Even Britt Baker, as much as like her character and stuff, she kind of stands there and does nothing.
Yeah.
Um, and it's kind of just like you say you're the face of the division and stuff, but you never ever take an action to go and be that. Not even as a cowardly heel do you try and get one up over someone. Very rarely, at least, and it's because they don't give them enough time. It's because they're not giving them enough effort in terms of the store booking and story wise. And it's just like it goes all the way down from the top to the bottom of the roster, and that's really the problem. Like at least in the men's division, like you said, you have Moxley who's taking on his opponents. Eddie Kingston, really, really an active guy. He'll go and take on people. The heels, if they've got a problem, they'll go out and they'll be angry. Lance Archer I've spoken about, but like Pac, when he returned with a vengeance, and even though the feud was a bit here and there, the storytelling of it was, I mean, it was just two guys had a problem with each other, and I guess that's all it needed to be. Really, it wasn't super complicated, but the characters had their vision, and their actions fit that.
Mhm.
Whereas in the women's division, the actions don't really fit their goals or what they're saying any of the time. They say a lot of stuff and never do it, and it just comes down to the fact that they're just not getting enough time. Like in at the bottom of or mid card and the bottom of the men's divisions and stuff, you have a lot of this similar level of storytelling. It shouldn't be that way at the top of the women's division. So, um, you know, it's just really frustrating to see.
No, it is undoubtedly frustrating to see, but yeah, like it's just I can't really add much more than that really. Um, but I think on to the next one being women's eliminator tournament now. Like
Yeah.
on about character, we know all about that now. And before we actually head into the tournament itself, I just want to take this moment as well to talk about something that the tournament does focus on, of course, given that it's its own prize, and that's the women's title.
Mm.
It's a fairly minor thing. It's a prop at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
But since day one, not many people have been big fans of that title. Am I wrong? Like,
The design of it, you mean?
yeah, the design of it, of
Yeah.
course. The design of
Yeah.
said title is just, for a lot of people, is kind of a representation of how they treat their women's division. Like,
Yeah. I
it's
hate it.
you know, and I think it's gonna have that stigma surrounding it a bit as well. Granted, they can book it and they can do extremely well, and
Mm.
if they do extremely well, and you can think differently of it in the future, wherever. But I think for the most part, I think the general public all agree on the fact that it's not particularly all that great. So,
Yeah.
as a very minor note, I think they should just change that title. But one clear thing is, I don't. For me personally, I wouldn't want them just changing it and changing it for the sake of changing it. Like saying,
Yeah.
for this title, we're gonna change the. Like, it's just no.
Well,
Use
for example, like I'd much rather they just booked it well rather than change the title. I can deal with like a bad title design, even though I think it looks silly,
no.
but
That's what I'm saying. It's a
just book
minor
it
note.
well. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's a very minor note. Um, but it's on that topic of kind of character in a way as well, because I think it would be a great motivation for a wrestler for them to do to change the title, you know,
Yeah.
to enhance their character or story or motivations going forward, you know. In
It would
itself,
take it.
it go on.
Yeah. It would take a lot of I guess balls on the company's part if they acknowledge the criticism of the title and division as a whole. Say Britt Baker wins it, and she says, "I've been looking at the women's division for a while
Well,
now,
no, it
and I
go on.
just and she as a heel she can get away with saying it and being like, look, ultimately you guys haven't stepped up to the plate. This is a new bar now, and I'm gonna bring out a new title, and it can be an egotistical thing like, look, this is my title, ha ha ha. Ha. And it's kind of like a way of getting around that thing. And again, like you said, it's very much a character motivated decision to do something. And also, you said the title's a prop, which it is, but it should be a storyline motivation. It should be a plot driver, really. It should be the top of the mountain. So, as much as it is a prop, it should be more than that.
Oh yeah, of
Um,
course.
but it's not at the moment. And I think that's part of the problem as well. Again, I think a lot of these things I'm hoping will be reduced or go away when Britt Baker's champion. That's the hope.
Wow. But yeah, just from that minor note onwards, women's elimination tournament. They've just announced this in the most recent AEW Dynamite at the time of recording, and it's obviously it's a step in the right direction, but there are some bits of information which by the time this goes out, or maybe when you're watching it, things might have changed. But at least at the time of recording, we don't know when this is taking place. It's just been labeled as coming soon.
Yeah.
And we don't even know if this is going to be on Dynamite very often.
Mm.
Which I think for a lot of people uh, wouldn't be particularly great. It would now first of all, let's create something a bit of balance here. The Mae Young Classic was on WWE's network,
Yeah.
right? So treating it
That was different because that was
no, I'm
indie
not.
talent coming in and stuff. A
Yeah,
lot of it. So yeah, and also
no,
their network is like their pay-per-view thing as well. But yeah,
but
I
like
just wanted to
YouTube
say.
is effectively AEW treating it as their own network, right?
Yeah, kind of.
But
Um,
that's where Being the Elite is. That's where all of their
and ultimately, it's not behind a paywall. It's free to view and stuff. So
so like I'm just trying to create a sense of balance here, like because I think
yeah,
even when other promotions have done these things, at least other promotions you can compare, someone like AEW to, they've
Mm.
went about it in a very similar way. So, but I think a huge thing about this is incentive, right? Is
Yeah.
showing an incentive in being inspired to provide a great tournament for women to showcase your talents, the women's talents, of course, and putting them on a major platform for people to care about. So when they are being shown on Dynamite and stuff, you're not getting those ratings falling, a couple of thousands leaving. They've been and
Yeah.
seen these in the tournament. They've seen some great stuff during this tournament for them to care about it. And so, for that reason, this tournament is obviously really good because you can generate stories from it. You can generate caring about people because of
Yeah.
this. Now, I want to really be positive about this, so I'm going to be negative on early on, because I want to end this on a good note. I am a bit concerned with the Japanese half of it because that says to me there are people coming from Japan, and I don't know if they're going to be sticking around.
Yeah.
You know how you said people like indie talents and stuff for me and classic WWE? Like that
Yeah.
shouldn't be what this is about. But from the
Yeah.
top of my head, I can't think of many people in Japan who are current. Like obviously you got Hikaru Shida, of course, the champion.
Yeah.
But then we're talking like Riho, we're talking Yuka Sakazaki, we're talking the people that we're familiar with, whether it be that Emi Sakura. Of course, Emi Sakura seems to be a little bit of a lock, like as if she's definitely going to be there because she's already tweeted about it, as if to say she's going to be
Yeah.
there.
That
Um,
kind of suggested to me as well. I don't know, because like you say about talents in slash from Japan, obviously she's influential on promotion over there, so I don't know if they would have done something to get some talent from there. I don't know, but
yeah.
it's possible.
Um, so yeah, I do have my doubts with that side. I know a lot of people are like really excited about it, like yeah, 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 yeah. But the thing is, I
Mm.
think it's very much a momentary thing of like, yeah, in the moment it'll be great, but I think going forward, I'm not too sure if it'll solve anything.
Yeah.
The issues that we're currently having, which I think
Mm.
is the real goal here. You know,
Yeah.
having a spike of, well, this is great stuff. It's all well and good, and it's amazing. That's just great. I'm not going to complain about having good stuff. It's
Mm.
just, you know, we've been talking about potential and all these people going forward, and that's all well and good. But you know, like we need we need stuff for the present, for like the near
Yeah.
present. And if you're gonna
I think.
go on,
Can you just imagine, like, again, I kind of what I think hoping for this tournament is, especially in regards to that Japanese talent. I'm hoping it's just the talent we know, so Sakura, Riho, and Yuka Sakazaki, all returning, rather than there being a whole another side of the tournament. Because the more I thought about it, as cool as it would be if they did strike a partnership with that company which Emi Sakura is involved in and stuff. I forget the name,
I'll get it.
but
But I've
as cool as that would be and stuff, again, like just like you said, it doesn't solve the problems moving forward. It doesn't give us a whole lot to really dive into in the women's division. Whereas like the women who are there kind of deserve a shot like this, a match with some stakes and stuff, and that's really going to help them develop. So also, I think like certain story potentials and stuff. Like imagine if you had Anna Jay draw Tay Conti in the first round, and then
yeah, it'd be
those
amazing.
two have got to go at it, and one of them gets the win. Probably Tay Conti just based on she's a little bit further ahead in development. You think she's probably the slightly bigger star out of the two of them as of now. Um, but I don't know. Maybe Anna Jay gets the help of the Dark Order and kind of gets a cheating win over Tay Conti, and that drives a bit of a wedge, and that's just something which can chip away at Tay Conti for a few months. Then something like that would just be really cool, and I'd hate for that an opportunity like that to be lost. I'm not saying they have to do that, but they can build different stories with the talent they've got. I'd hate for something like that where it's like, okay, this is an opportunity to do matches you couldn't do otherwise because it's a tournament. It's a competitive thing. It's like Hangman versus Kenny. The reason they were able to do that at this point without a title or anything is because it was a competitive thing. They met in a tournament and they came head to head. They both want to win ultimately, and it's just a really good way of doing matches like that. Again, we've seen like Will Ospreay was in over in New Japan, been facing Okada in matches like these for years in New Japan Cups or in G1s or whatever it was,
Yeah,
and he'd always lose. And then eventually they met in the G1 this year just gone, and Will Ospreay said, "I'm not going to lose this time," and he made sure he didn't, and that was you could see that in his character and stuff. So the stakes involved in a tournament are really really easy ways to create some drama out of something, and if they don't do a good job of booking this tournament in terms of like building stories, potential feuds for the future down the line, it can be a fun tournament and stuff, and that would be okay. But I would be disappointed. You hold AEW to a higher standard than companies like WWE, who have themselves have booked good tournaments in the past. A couple of the Dusty Rhodes classics have been really good and had long-lasting effects for months or at times years to come. If you think about DIY, um, so yeah, like you hold AEW to a higher standard than them though, and I don't know why people. This part of the thing that frustrates me about the women's division is like if you can book well for men, you can book well for women. The point is they just don't want to, and so I think they booked the eliminator tournament for the men. It's a smaller tournament, so arguably harder to book actually. I'd say, but they booked that well, and obviously a really nice final that really did something cool. So there's no real reason they shouldn't be able to do that here. But with the tag one, the women's tag one, I think for what it was, they booked that pretty much as well as they could, and they got something like Take On to Anna Jay out of that. So you know the considering how they booked the tag tournament, they booked the men's tag tournament as well for the title, and the TNT tournament with what they did with Cody and Darby Allin in that, and the way they built Lance Archer through that as well. They haven't missed in terms of a tournament so far, so I wouldn't expect them to. But again, just based on how they book the women's division generally, that is a slight worry I'd have. I think.
Yeah, no, you kind of touched on a good few of the points I was going to make, really. It's just essentially having confidence in this, them being able to book stuff like this. I do agree with you that the women's tag tournament, I do think, all things considered, it was booked reasonably well. Like, because you
Yeah,
could have went
wasn't
so much
amazing, but
worse. No, but like that's
yeah,
true. It was reasonable, you know. Um,
yeah,
and like, because obviously people complain about Cameron. I forgot what her actual name is now, but like when she came in and everyone was kicking
yeah,
off and stuff. When the reality is that they just needed someone to be an excuse for Nyla Rose to not go forward, and so they brought someone in
yeah,
who could easily just take a loss and no one would care about. And she
yeah.
was the perfect person for that, even though Nyla
Well,
Rose should have went ahead with it.
yeah, she should have beaten the fuck out of her and whatever.
Yeah,
But like, it's like in tournaments, like you're gonna get a talent like I don't know. Probably some of the dark talent will be in the first round and they'll get beaten because in the first round you need some people to just take a loss because ultimately you're building to the bigger, more exciting matches. And so
exactly.
I expect like we'll probably see Alex Gracia again, depending on if half of this is Japanese talent, then we probably won't. But if it's just those three Japanese talents returning, which I hope it is, because I'd rather see honestly Red Velvet get a shot, even though she's going to lose first round get a shot against someone maybe like a Serena Deeb or something. I don't know if she'll be in it. She's NWA champion, but
Yeah.
hopefully she is. I mean, that's something. Serena Deeb can get pinned in like the semi-final to the person who loses the final, and then you set up yourself an NWA match, and that's
Classic
just like,
New Japan move.
yeah, it's so simple and stuff. So stuff like that, I'd expect them to do something like that, for example. But like, for example, Red Velvet got that match against Serena Deeb. That would be a great way to go. Um, Another thing I would like to see is we spoke about Thea Trinidad earlier. I think this would be like a good place for her to get her first match, and I think it would be nice considering she will be a big star in the division to go straight through to the final, not win, but I think her versus Yuka Sakazaki, who I think is my hope to win, and I think is yours as well.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think that would be a fun match and something you could do and would be really good. And then also off the back of what my plan was earlier, Serena Deeb was in the semi and Thea Trinidad beat her to get to the final. Thea Trinidad versus Serena Deeb will be a nice, NWA feud that you could take moving forward. Like she's a big star, so she's going to be doing well in terms of this division at least. She's going to be doing stuff like that. Don't want to give her the big wins immediately. I wouldn't have her win the championship or the tournament, but a good way to debut her. And then from there, if you built to a big match against Britt Baker months down the line,
Mm-hmm.
um, I mean, maybe that could be your next champion, or if not, it would be a really good challenger for Britt Baker. And if you established her like that, so I'd like to see them do something like that as well.
Yeah, definitely. But by the way, just to make a clear point, because we talked about character and the utilization of Japanese talent thing, the only reason I want Yuka to win is because I think she's a good first challenger. Because I think, when this starts, the Women's World Championship, because I think we're going to get a couple of segments as to who's going to be in it,
Mm,
leading to it. Who draws who. Blah blah blah. Because they're all big moments, and they are. I do like those moments. Um,
yeah,
Personally, it'll take time, and I hope we have a new champion by this point. And I
yeah,
would hope for someone like Shida, for example, this is a great way because well, granted, the win loss record now is going to go long down, but she's going to obviously be up there for like a rematch or something. If
mm,
she, say, had a loss here in a semi final, number one, whoever gets that win over her, that's great for her. That
yeah,
and that means the Shida can move on to something else almost immediately going forward, and that'll be a story slash feud thing going forward, which is great. You know,
yeah.
that is all hoping. But you seem like you're gonna
One
say
thing I
something.
would like,
Go on.
one thing I would like Sheeta to do is if they are going to do stuff with Impact and stuff after she drops the title, I think Diana Perrazzo and Britt Baker would make a funny, um, not team, but I mean, you could do something where like it's Shida and Yuka versus Diana and Britt Baker, on, like as a tag on Dynamite, which would be fun. And then Shida maybe goes and challenges um, Diana for the Impact title over on Impact, obviously, and I that would get me to tune into Impact because I want to watch that match. Well,
Mm,
I wouldn't tune in weekly, but when that match was on, I tune in.
yeah.
Um, and there's been some teasers about that online already, so I wonder that could be a potential place. And that's good because ultimately you kind of want to. AEW don't like doing rematches, so if you find a good way of moving Sheeta out of the title picture without having her basically get buried, or she's not gonna get buried, but you know what I mean, like losing like 3 or 4 matches, which isn't really necessary. She competing Impact for a couple of months or something, maybe you could build to then a rematch and a few months down the line when it's a bit more fresh and whatever. But yeah, um, yeah, I'm with you though, 100%. I want this to be after Revolution when Britt Baker's champion, hopefully, and this will hopefully establish the division in a better way. But her first challenger and Yuka Sakazaki, I think she's Riho's first champion. Shida's been the champion. Um, Yuka Sakazaki seemed like she was getting a push after that before the pandemic and hit, and I just like her because out of the three Joshi talents we saw, I think at the time she was my favorite. Obviously, Shida kind of has looked really good in the time where she's been away. But yeah, I'm a big fan. You see all the clips and stuff on Twitter circling around. She's so good,
Yeah,
and
also we've seen proof with them too that they're able to tell some really great segments as well in history.
yeah, for sure.
So there's a bit of that involved as well, of course. Character, motivations,
Yeah,
and on a
Yuka's
general
by far
scale.
the.
Go on.
No, no, you finish. I interrupted you.
I just generally just seen some great stuff, just seen some unique stuff because we haven't seen that before. You can
Yeah,
hate that segment where Baker pulls out Yuka's tooth as much as he wants because at the time I was like, oh, I'm not too sure if I'm a big fan of this. It's alright, like, but
mm,
like it's something rather than Sheeda looking on from the sidelines,
yeah,
and just looking just like grr, like or running
yeah.
away from a zombie, like I'd take that tenfold. Like, but go on.
Yeah, I was just gonna say out of those three, or I guess there were more than three Joshi talents that they signed, but the three main ones who were going to be pushed and stuff. I always felt Yuka was like the most charismatic and stuff. And you look at Asuka, I think that's something which, if you are coming in to a different country that speaks a different language, your natural charisma is going to get you a long way. And you just look what it's done for Asuka. I'm not saying necessarily she's on that same level, obviously, but I saw more potential with her than the others. That's no, I like all three of them ultimately, but yeah. So hopefully, and like you said, the history between Yuka and Britt Baker, they've had a match before, and there were things significant to Britt Baker's character, where it's worth you know recalling them, and significant enough to Yuka Sakazaki, where she'd be like, well, you went too far last time, and I'm not going to let you get there to go too far this time. And even if she isn't going to win, which obviously if Baker's a new champion won't and shouldn't happen, you can find a way through getting her own back in that way, where it's like you can tell a little bit of a story there that allows Yuka to come out with something as well. So yeah, hopefully it's just good. Hopefully it's good stuff. It would be a shame if it is something in Japan. It's like 8 women from Japan all competing in Japan. They throw something up on YouTube, and it's like, yeah, this is one half of the women's tournament, and then the other half we're going to do a match every week on Dynamite until we get to the final. Blah blah blah. That would be disappointing to see, just because I think there's just so much more potential in this ultimately, and I'm hoping they will establish the division with it properly. So that's the hopes anyway.
Yeah. Well, either way, that has been our thoughts of AEW's women's division.
Sure has.
And all I can really say, really, and I think I've got a couple of things here as well as we take gets to the end. And Statlander, again, I really liked this thing because I like hearing from the talent themselves, gives you just a bit more of an insight, because at the end of the day, right, we don't know everything, as much as Gareth says you will on
Yeah.
Twitter when
I don't.
right, like at the end of the day, like, we don't know everything, we don't know what it's like to be around, we don't know all these things, and we can talk as much as we do, and we can have some inkling of an idea as to what should and shouldn't be done. But at the end of the day, Statlander says itself here that she believes that they can do better. But in her own words, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah.
It's not. It's going
That's
to
always
take
going to
time,
take time.
and everyone has to accept that. And I think a great thing is that the Twitter fan base, the AEW fan base, are calling for it because they care.
Yeah.
It's when people have been called out for it, be that Kenny Omega, which he shouldn't be too much. I think he should be
Yeah.
accountable, but I don't think he
Yeah.
should be fully accountable as
He's
if
part
he's
of the
the
team,
reason.
isn't
Yeah,
he?
you know? People treat it as if he is the sole reason, like, in
Yeah.
which you are wrong if you think that. Um, but, and Omega has committed, in his own words himself, saying that one of his main goals of this year
Yeah.
is to make the women's division better. You know, that's one
And
of
he
his.
said that in response to like the kind of, I don't want to say it was necessarily praise, but it was like a thing that people say, oh, it's getting better, and he was like, yeah, like my main thing is like I want it to be really good. I want it to
Mm,
be. And that was good to see. It wasn't just because like he was put under pressure and like being like, oh, he didn't say this like months ago when the division was getting slaughtered. Um, it's good to see him come out now and say something like that in a time where it's getting better, and more and more people are starting to recognize that, which shows to me it's like at least Omega backstage. I assume the rest of them, but they're not just sitting there and being like, "Well, we're getting a little bit of praise now. That's good. Let's just do this." It's still like, "Okay, let's do a tournament. Let's do this," and they're still pushing things forward, and ultimately it's just building things into a better, like Statlander said, it wasn't all built in a day, but it is just building towards getting things to be better. So it's positive sign, that was for me, a really positive sign.
yeah. And that's all we've got really. Like, we've got positive signs. It's just the destination
Mm.
that we're currently at isn't all that great. Like, so it's just getting there. But
Yeah,
either way, thank you very much for tuning in, for watching this video, all that great stuff. Obviously, as it shows on the screen, please subscribe. Consider subscribing. If you've watched it thus far, that would mean a humongous lot in that. So thank you very much. Obviously, the bell icon as well, so you can be notified as to when the next episode is available. And of course, all of our Twitter handles, they're there. I don't really say a whole lot much, other than being a bit moany. And then Gareth, he will say some eloquent, well reasoned, and long ass threads to
Sometimes
put
not
people.
well reasoned. Yeah.
um, and so you can expect that as well. So thank you very much for tuning in. You can expect us on Wednesday where we watch long. When we do our watch long on Twitch of AEW Dynamite. That's essentially it. You can
Yeah.
watch AEW Dynamite with us, and it's a good laugh in that as well. So thank you very much for being with us, and we'll be seeing you soon. Bye bye.
Bye bye.